Hey, this is Christian Buckley, Microsoft Regional Director and Office Apps and Services MVP. And I'm interviewing Vlad Catrinescu, so Office Apps and Services MVP as well, a product evangelist at Valo Intranet and a well-known Pluralsight author, and also one of the best resources online for all of the online training courses. I point people over to his site all the time. And we're talking today about Teams governance as part of the ESPC community. So Vlad, thanks a lot for connecting and talking today.
Hey, thank you for having me, Christian. Really excited to be here.
All right, well, let's just jump into it. This is a big topic, of course. A lot of people asking questions about this. So here's question number one. How do you define governance for Microsoft Teams? Because it's such a broad category of governance, it's probably good to get your perspective on what it means within the Teams environment.
Sure. So, like you said, it's a huge topic, but if I had to put it in kind of an elevator pitch in only a few words, I would say finding the balance between IT control, security, and productivity, allowing people to actually get work done. And I have a slide in one of my Pluralsight courses where actually I have like a balance, and you need to make sure that's fair. And I always tell people there's nothing more important than security as part of your IT job. The last thing you want is to see your company on the front page of the newspaper and see like millions of data leaked from your company because somebody misconfigured something.
Wait a second, Vlad, all advertising is good advertising, except when there's a data
Yeah.
breach or something
Uh,
else. Yeah,
Ask Equifax it was. I think they had a lot of advertising. Yeah.
that's right.
uh, that's true in most of the cases, but not with IT security those days. It's an expensive marketing campaign,
Yeah.
let's say. So there's nothing more important than security, making sure that you don't have bad people that get access to your team, people that may not be working to your partners anymore that still have access to NDA information. And that goes a bit into the compliance part. But from a governance point of view, you also don't want to have five people create a Microsoft Teams team for the same project. Start each of them creating stuff in Planner, creating things here and there, and then realizing like, oh, hey IT, by mistake we created five teams. Can you please merge them together really quick?
Well,
Yeah.
but a really common scenario, for both of us coming from the SharePoint background as well, is that, is trying to figure out with all of those legacy sometimes classic, not yet in the modern UX, but SharePoint sites that you want to, teamify and bring
Yeah.
in. And so those are things that you need to think of, and just the naming conventions alone for existing SharePoint sites, for Yammer communities, if you have that running, or along with your Office 365 groups, all of those things, like, you need to be having those conversations up front. And that, would you say, is part of it's part of that broader governance
Oh
scope?
yeah. Oh yeah, but at the same time, you don't want to block the users of like turning it off completely and then telling them as soon as you want something, you got to open a help desk ticket, and we'll get back to you within a week and see what you actually want. Because you know what people will do? They're just gonna go to Dropbox.com, pay $100 for a year, and get their job done. So governance for me is finding that balance of how do we empower users to collaborate, get the stuff they need to do done, while still keeping things in control, giving them a safe sandbox that they can be free to play with, but us making sure like, who, okay, we have a user from the HR department creating a project site that needs an approval. But if somebody from the PMO wants a project site, that should not create an approval because they're the ones in charge of that. So it's creating that balance of productivity and control at the same time. So that's how I would define teams governance at a high level, finding that balance.
Well, that's a good segue for question number two. So a hot topic for many teams, customers, is that control, as you talked about, the
Yeah.
control over how teams are created. So what are the best practices that you share with your customers about governance and about that provisioning process?
I always tell them, first of all, look in your company and nobody create, I'm not going to say nobody. Most people don't create a team just for the fun of it, right? They need it for a project, they need it for a community, they need it for a steering group. And oftentimes, as much as we say Microsoft is the hub of productivity, Microsoft Teams, sorry, is the hub of productivity, it's not only about teams, right? You have the teams, which plays an important part, but you often also have stuff in Planner, you have stuff in SharePoint, you have stuff around that Microsoft Teams team that needs to be done. Look at your company and try to figure out, okay, what are our collaboration workspaces that we need? You might have a project collaboration workspace that might include, like, say, a Teams team with 4 channels already built in, different apps, different tabs. And on the SharePoint site, you might want to have list web parts already built in. Try to capture those requirements and create templates for users. So a user doesn't only go and create a team, they go and create a project collaboration workspace with all of the stuff already built in for them. And that will also, first of all, make it easier for the user. They don't have to manually set up stuff every single time. But for the end user as well, when they go from project A to project B, they're going to have the same structure, the same way of working. They're not going to have 10 different ways of managing projects inside the same company. So try to templatize as much as possible and also create an easy request process. Not Don't go through help desk every single time and have my keyboard isn't working, I cannot connect to the VPN, and I need a new project. All go in the same queue. We now have so many tools inside Microsoft 365 and Power Platform to make it happen, from Power Apps or even Microsoft Forms if you want for that form, to Power Automate that can integrate with Azure Automation to automate all of that. There's no excuse for having it inside a help desk system anymore. So
Right.
try to have a provisioning system in the back end. Microsoft started, I mean, it was all custom before 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And now,
Right.
now Microsoft actually has a templating solution because they saw the need, they heard the need from the community and for everybody.
Is that rolling out yet, or are we still waiting for that?
It started rolling out.
Okay.
I know some people have it, some people have it partially, like sometimes they see it in the admin center, but it didn't roll out to the client yet. But yeah, I think it started rolling out for targeted release, of course, not for probably not for everyone yet. But yeah, it started, right? They
Right.
give you a bunch of pre-made templates and you can templatize stuff inside Teams only. So you can capture channel names, you can capture tabs, apps, and things like that. It doesn't support all of the good stuff with SharePoint yet. So you cannot capture, like, say, pre-made lists and libraries inside SharePoint. I'm sure eventually it will come because people will be like, "Ooh, I can do that, but I want that." It's probably already on user voice and people voting for it. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if it will get there. But yeah, it's starting to get there natively without any custom dev as well, which is awesome.
Well, one of the things that I really like about the teams and the as that work and productivity hub is that it's a great answer for a lot of the shadow IT initiatives that things that pop up. If people don't feel like their needs are being met, and they'll then run to these other tools that may not be compliant, they may not be secure. That you may just not be aware of them, and then your intellectual property is out on these third party servers or
Yeah.
services. But there's a great point of discussion in any broader governance strategy in an organization is when you identify those things rather than just slapping hands and be like, no, you can't do that. Is like, well, is there an unneed met for a new template, a new type? Are we too restrictive in that provisioning process, and where it's keeping people from getting their work done? That's part of that ongoing discussion that has to be part of that process. because it's an iterative thing. It's not going to be
It's
perfect.
not a once and done, especially with
Right.
the cloud now. It's not like we can say, "Oh, we've implemented this new tool. When we migrate in 3 years, we're gonna relook at it again." There's no more
Right.
migration every 3 years. So you,
Right.
you, I've seen many companies have like a committee, a governance committee that meets monthly to review. Okay, what has happened? Where do we need to evolve on? What has been the user feedback? And like you said, has there any parts of the process where it's been too slow and made people complain that it hindered their productivity?
Well,
So it's definitely
well,
something that needs to be in a
let's talk
live
about the
thing.
let's talk about the evolution and some of that. So here, question three. So Ignite 2020 is now behind us. What were some of the major announcements that you think will have a sizable impact on Teams governance?
So first of all, templating, of course, we've already mentioned it. That's probably one of the main ones. There's been a lot of improvements in regards to all of the app deployment and app configuration. We've seen really this push by Microsoft where I think it's Teams as a platform. You have Teams, really cool, but instead of having our custom apps only in Power Apps or in SharePoint, why don't we make them as apps directly in Teams? So a lot of improvements on making sure that apps can be deployed in Teams, admins can consent on permissions on behalf of the user, so users don't have to have that bad experience on the first click. Hey, you want to open this? You got to grant them blah, 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 and users are scared to click OK.
Right.
So making that easy and having apps pre-installed on users for like day one, everything you need is there. So that has been awesome. And a lot of improvements on the policy assignment. A big part of Teams governance is also, can users record meetings or not? Can users do this or not? Whether it's meetings, messaging, big part of that is it's in the governance. And we actually needed to use the Skype for Business PowerShell commandlets in order and PowerShell module to apply that at a large scale. Now that's part of the Teams PowerShell module. It's still Skype for Business, but at least it's all part of the Teams module. A lot easier for Teams admins to do bulk policy assignment to users now. So a lot easier to automate in the end. So I would say that's my top three.
I know there's a lot more to consume. I like probably like
Sure.
you. I'm still going through the book of news and blog posts and trying to find things. What I love about having like doing these interviews and participating in or following, watching panel discussions about Ignite announcements is that every one of them is different. People come in with different backgrounds and highlight. It's interesting to see what other people kind of focus in on
Oh
because
yeah,
there are announcements that I completely missed. Like in my watching of my schedule and scouring down through, I was looking for certain things, and then other people, oh, and they mentioned this and they demoed this. I'm like, I missed
they
that.
did.
Yeah, right. It's well, that's the other thing we have to be careful of as MVPs is did I hear that announced or was that an NDA discussion on a call? And so I'm going to go back and check before I can answer the question.
Always check the tech community blog posts before.
Exactly. That's right. I often do that. I'll be in a meeting with a client and we'll be like, hang on, let me go check.
Let's
Oh, hey,
double
I can
check.
talk to you about that. It's public. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Well, I really appreciate your time today. A lot of great information. I know governance, as you know, I'm passionate about the topic as
We
well,
could
but
talk about an hour about it if we had
uh,
the time.
we could talk hours
Yeah.
about this. Yes. Well, thanks a lot. And for those that are watching in the live program, thanks a lot for participating for this ESPC conference, and enjoy the rest of the day.